with passion and intelligence. Celebrate 20 years of great documentaries, drama, and shorts from the National Film Board's Ontario Centre. NFB Showcase, tonight at 11 on TVO.
Story behind a little-known chapter in Ontario history. It is set in a lonely cemetery near Kirkland Lake, and it's about the Jewish pioneers of Northern Ontario. It is about a community that once thrived, but has almost disappeared, and about the people who keep the memory alive. Tonight we take you to a place called Krugerdorf. It is an obscure cemetery which stands as a monument to a time the ancestors of those Jewish settlers have not quite forgotten, at least not yet.
Community now. They're no longer in the synagogue. They're buried there, the majority of them. And it's a tribute to the history of the North, of the Jewish pioneers who came up there.
You're very saddened at a funeral. When that wind blows, it just goes right through your bones. It's sad. It's awful.
The Jewish community was transient. It's sad. It's the end of an era. It's the passing of time.
So, Eddie, what do you call this place?
Well, this is the Hebrew cemetery, which is located between Kirkland Lake and Englehart. Actually, the place called Krugerdorf.
Krugerdorf?
Yeah.
Is that named after anything? Or
I think probably named after Mr. Kruger. There was also, besides Jewish farmers, there were German farmers here, and they may have been here first, and it was named after them. This part of the cemetery, actually, that you see to the left of us, really, is a part that we don't use anymore because we don't really know who's buried there. When we tried to use it, we often found we would dig and we would find graves of people who had been buried, and there were no markers. So eventually we decided to move the cemetery back where we would be sure that there would be no old graves here. And it's kind of nice to have this in front in this avenue of trees.
So there are people buried here even though there are no headstones.
But we don't know where they are. We don't know how many or when or where they came from or anything like that.
And the original settlers in this community are here now. Can you tell me about them? Who were they?
They were mostly Jews who came north into northern Ontario at a time when times were difficult and hard, and they wanted a way of making a living, and some of them wanted to be farmers. They wanted to own land. They wanted to have their own farms. That was a sort of a big ambition in those days because they couldn't own a farm in Europe or in Russia where they came from. And I think they were brought here because they were tempted by the fact that they were offered land if they would work on the railway. And when they were recruiting people to work on the ONR, actually, by good fortune, I think, the person who was recruiting these people for Jake Englehart in those days was Jewish. And he wasn't prejudiced against hiring Jews to do labor, which a lot of people would not have done. And he hired, if a man said he was a blacksmith and he looked, he had the qualifications, he hired him. He was a teamster and he knew horses, he hired him.
My grandfather, Hyman Kaplan, came to this country in 1903, worked originally in Toronto and New York, but at one time the Ontario government was offering free one-way passage for people to settle in the north, and he took the train to what was then called Swastika and still is. It was a railway community, and from there he went on into the then fledgling town of Kirkland Lake. Gold had yet to be discovered. And he figured that something for nothing, what can I lose? I'll take this ticket and go up there. So that's exactly what he did.
This particular area belonged to the Hinarovsky farm. And when the first death took place, the first burial took place here, as I know the story, he said, well, we have to bury this person somewhere. We'll take this corner of my farm, this corner of my land, and we'll make a cemetery here and we'll use it.
But that's why this cemetery is here. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Well, they say there are two stories about who was buried here first. One story, of course, is about the Kustner and Vreeland family, that their grandfather, who arranged to have these two men meet and marry two of his daughters, which they did, that on the way here from Europe and crossing the river at Thomastown, their boat tipped, and the grandfather family was drowned, but the two girls were saved. And the other story, incidentally, that about who was the first person here is, this is a folk tale, and I can't verify it, but I was told by a very old Jewish person from Ansonville, who was buried here, that there's a story about a Jew who was working on the railway along here, and it came time for the high holidays, and he wanted to be in Cobalt, where there was a Jewish community. And he decided to walk from here to Cobalt, which is some 50 miles. And in walking on the railway track, he was very cold. It was cold, and he had wrapped himself up in his prayer shawl. He was covered with his prayer shawl and huddled up and walking on the track. And he didn't hear a train coming, and the train struck him, and he was killed. And that they say that he was the first person buried here. So I'm not sure which story is actually the most accurate.
That sounds more apocryphal than anything, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but the man who told me the story, I believe this story because I knew the man who told it to me, and he had been around a lot longer than I was. He's buried here.
Now, do I have this right? I understand of all the people who came here once upon a time, there was one Jew who went into the gold prospecting business?
There's only one person in this cemetery that I think of that might have claimed to have been a prospector, and that was Rosie Brown, and she was another famous character.
Rosie Brown,
yes.
A woman prospector.
She was a woman everything. That's another story. You could do another whole story about her.
Go ahead, give me a hint. Why is she so famous?
Well, she came to Kirkland Lake in the very early years and had land there. She knew Harry Oak. She knew most of the early founders of the mines in Kirkland Lake. She had a lot of little properties that she rented. And she made a living, and she, as I say, she had been a laundry woman in Cobalt and had been a number of things. We really don't know much. Her life is a mystery. One of her cousins was a Park Avenue doctor in New York City. She could speak umpteen languages. She used to act as the court interpreter on many occasions. She was followed around by a pack of dogs that obeyed her implicitly and were surrounded her feet wherever she went. You know, she made the papers thousands of times. She went to Halifax to greet the king when he arrived, or the queen when she was on tour. She used to will her properties off to the crown. When she wouldn't pay her taxes, she'd put them in her will to the crown, and then they couldn't seize them because they were now crown property. She was just full of all kinds of goodies, you know. But she was a very famous character, really, and she happens to be buried here, too. She wasn't active in the Jewish community, but because she was Jewish and needed to be buried when she died, we buried her here.
There are 6 Jews left in Kirkland Lake today, is that right?
That's right.
At one time, 500.
I would say at least. We had about 120 Jewish families.
What was this place like, this town, when there were 500 Jewish families here? There must have been, it must have been a real sense of community.
Well, Kirkland Lake was a very, very special town. I think really like Cobalt and like Timmins. I think Kirkland Lake was probably the last of the camps, you might say. Lots were small. People didn't have too much money. They built small homes. And the business section, to a great extent, while it was not entirely Jewish, I would say that probably about 60% of the business section was Jewish-owned. And, of course, their children went to high school here and went to school here and were active, played football and all those good things, you know.
If there were more than 500 Jewish people in this town at one point, everybody must have known everybody, which means everybody's probably going to everybody's, brisses, bar mitzvahs, weddings.
That's absolutely true. When you had a wedding in Kirkland Lake, you not only invited all the Jewish people in Kirkland Lake, You invited all the Jewish people in Timmins and all the Jewish people in Noranda, and everybody was welcome, and they were really some great parties.
You remember them, I can tell.
Oh,
This is probably
yes,
50 years ago.
I certainly do.
Morris, tell me about this place. What is this?
This is our synagogue. In 1927, it became a real center for Kirkland Lake because we had a dance hall in the back. We used it as a religious synagogue.
When did this place stop being used?
Well, in 1971, officially, we sold the building. A few years before that, we had found that there wasn't enough income to warrant having a building of this size, and we held on as long as we could, and the community kept going down and down. And as you might not know, is that it requires 10 Jewish men to constitute a prayer service. And it got to the point where we just didn't have that many. So that was the beginning of the end.
Well, I left Englehart, it's about 15 years now. When my dad passed on, I took over. I was the only one left in Englehart. My wife came from Toronto. And I thought, well, what am I going to stay here for? I haven't anything to do. So we bought this apartment 2 years before we even moved down here. And I decided, well, keep my wife happy, and I haven't anything to do in Englehart, so I decided to come here. About 1981. I moved to Toronto, and then I'm still here. It makes me feel bad, because there's none there now. There's no Jewish people at all left in Englehart. I think I was about the last one to move out.
This magnificent edifice was originally in the Kirkland Lake Synagogue. My grandfather was one of the original people who was instrumental in bringing this Aron HaKodesh from Montreal to Kirkland Lake. When my grandfather died, my father was left and his family, and one by one the family died or decided to move to the city. When my father passed on, he had already told me, he said, please don't leave it here. And it was sort of symbolic that the circle became complete when my grandfather was one of the original ones, and when my father died, there was no longer a minyan, there were no longer 10 men to properly have a service in the synagogue. And at that time, I decided I would do something about it. And the move was accelerated when I spoke to my mother, who was still living in Kirkland Lake, and she said, you know, the synagogue is having a terrible problem. Either the roof was falling in, or there was some structural problem with the synagogue in the middle of the winter. And I made them a proposition, my husband and I, because this was a joint decision, that we would like to take the furnishings, which included the Aron HaKodesh, the Sefer Torahs, the Ner Tamid, which is the internal light up there, the benches, everything to Toronto, and put it into our chapel. I've attended funerals in Krugerdorf for many years, unfortunately. I have family buried there. I have several very, very young cousins who died in tragic circumstances. And the funerals that I have attended are very, very sad. It's in the middle of nowhere. In winter, to go there, it's like going out of a Russian novel to see this place completely covered with snow. And you take this casket out from the hearse, and by the time you get a stretcher, by the time you get all your pallbearers together to carry it, and it's slugging through snow. I mean, this is a cemetery, and we don't have the amenities of Toronto where they pave or they shovel the snow for you. You're in snow up to your hips, for heaven's sakes, and you take this out. It's tough.
I have a very vivid memory one funeral that I attended there, and my wife's aunt died. And the casket had to be carried through 4 or 5 feet of snow. The grave had been opened by burning gasoline on it for, I think, 24 hours to excavate a grave. It was, well, of course, you're very saddened at a funeral. When that wind blows, it just goes right through your bones. It's sad. It's awful. They had to remove the handles because they were metal. It is traditional to have a wooden box. The caretaker who was unscrewing these handles because it was so cold fell into the grave. They had to help him out. It was a nightmare. And but that's the way of the North. The lady was buried, and we all went back to town. But to me, this was an experience that I haven't forgotten.
My father, who came after the First World War, I guess in 1919, had told me for many, many years that when he died, he did not want to be buried in Krugerdorf. He had nothing against Krugerdorf, but he felt that he had served enough of his time in the cold weather of Northern Ontario, and he just felt that he wanted to go somewhere where the climate was a little bit warmer. And he had no feeling for Krugerdorf as far as being buried there. And the thing was, too, that he also realized that his family was not coming back to Kirkland Lake.
Where are you going to be buried?
In Toronto. Yeah.
But you've been here a long time. You've been here all 30 years.
30 years. And I've been up north over 30. I've been up north probably 45 years.
Because you're in North Bay before this.
North Bay, and then I was in Timmins 12 years.
So how come you're not going to be buried up here?
Well, I have a daughter in Toronto, Bradford, and I have a son, and I want people to come and visit me once in a while. So, and I figure that's what's going to happen.
Okay. So once you and Eddie are gone, who takes care of the cemetery?
I don't know of anybody who will follow us because there are no young people left.
This is really the only Jewish cemetery in sort of northeastern Ontario, north of Toronto, is that right?
So far as I know, yes. See, North Bay was still close enough to ship people to Toronto.
No, that's your mother.
It's my wife.
That's your wife, right. And your brother?
It's my brother, yes.
Don't misunderstand this next question. It's not like I'm looking forward to it or anything, but you expect to join Mildred here someday, do you know?
Yeah, right there. My plot will be right beside her as they're holding it for me.
Eddie, you've said that when you drive by here, you say Kaddish. You say a prayer for the dead, not only for your family members, but also for those who have nobody to say Kaddish for them. When you are here in your final resting place beside your wife, who's going to say Kaddish for you?
I don't know.
You think about that?
Well, of course I think about it. Everybody thinks about it, but you have to live your life. That's all. You have to live your life and believe in what you believe in. Somebody will say Kaddish for me. I have granddaughters. I have a grandson. They'll find me.